Marty Bent, Happy New Year. Good to see you.
Happy New Year. It's great to be back, sir.
And so we are the second day of the quote unquote golden era, right? Isn't that what we're seeing around the news cycles today?
We're almost 24 hours in. We're 23 hours, 11 minutes in. The golden era has started. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little brighter. I'm feeling a little lighter. I'm kidding. I don't know. It was definitely a spectacle of a first day back in office for Donald Trump. I don't know if you caught the Oval Office executive order signings last night. It was funny to watch him signing those EOs and talking to the press. It was actually honestly refreshing. Whether you like Trump or not, I think objectively his ability to open up and just speak freely with the press is a stark difference compared to what we saw in the previous 4 years.
For sure. And even just 15 minutes of him getting asked questions, and you're like, that was more than Biden did in 4 years.
Right.
But you know what I thought was, he is always a showman, the entertainer. Whether you like him or not, he's a phenomenon that we're never going to see this in politics ever again, right? It's like the
No.
end of Michael Jordan's career, Tom Brady, on and on and on. But the fact that he signed those executive orders in an arena with 20,000 people watching yesterday, did you see that?
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. Yeah, I mean, he's very particular about how he presents everything, and I think that was the message he was trying to imbue yesterday. His changes here. I'm going to make it very obvious by putting this desk in the middle of this arena and begin signing executive orders.
And the crowd is just going crazy.
Yeah, the Barron reception when he pointed out Barron, I think Barron got a hero's applause, which was hilarious.
And did you see him doing like the Hulk Hogan thing with the ear? Like, I want to hear more.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you have to just live in the moment for this period in history on the political front, because again, we're never it's never going to happen.
no, no, and it is. And I had like mixed feelings yesterday. It was definitely a spectacle, and I am definitely happy that Donald Trump won over Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and the blob behind them. But yeah, the executive orders themselves, like this was something that Obama normalized, and then Trump took on, then Biden took on, and now it's accelerated. And while I agree with many of the executive orders, most of the executive orders that were signed, that leveraging that medium of power from the executive branch, it does make me a bit uneasy because what happened last night, it's just like you don't have no stability over the course of a long time period. Trump's first EO was essentially negating all of Biden's EOs, and so you just have this hot potato of executive orders that that the American people are subjected to now. I guess it's been completely normalized. Um, so it will be interesting to see how that the executive orders are leveraged, or if they're reined in at all at some point in the next few terms, because I do think that is a slippery slope.
Well, what is your concern then? I mean, we were talking about before I ask you that we were talking about censorship prior to coming on here, and I was telling you like how I don't understand the YouTube algorithm. You were saying how some of your episodes get huge amounts of views, and I've been put in 7-day timeout once. I was given a warning. Wasn't one of your episodes with Dave pulled from like you'd
Hmm.
recorded it? And wasn't it like 8 months later they yanked it?
Yeah, yeah. It was 8 months to a year later, and I think it was because we mentioned COVID vaccines. Sorry, I've been taught to not say that because we mentioned some medical um, medical devices that were created. Yeah, 8 months later. I don't know how it works. I know so we got put on a list. TFTC. We got put on a list created by the Center for Countering Digital Hate, and we were put on a list of quote unquote new deniers in the realm of climate change deniers. And
Seems appropriate, Marty. I think that's where you should be. Yeah.
yeah, that was getting put on that list was illuminating because the Center for Countering Digital Hate basically explained how they created the list and the tools that they're using to flag these channels and particular episodes to YouTube. The Center for Countering Digital Hate essentially uses an AI transcription service that scrapes every episode produced by these channels and uses the transcripts to find keywords pertaining to climate denial or new denial as they defined it. And then if they find wrongthink in the transcriptions, in the keyword searches that they set out there, they'll flag it to YouTube. And so that's technically not the YouTube algo, that's an external force reporting to YouTube, but then YouTube, I know, is running AI transcription as well. I mean, closed captioning is evidence of that. And so, yeah, I don't know. And it is, they do pick and choose. I don't know if there is some human element to the process of deciding to pull content or demonetize content that the algo sort of flags something and a human reads it and then decides to flag it or not. And depending on the censor that you're handed that day and what their personal views are, it can decide whether or not your content gets pulled. That's how I imagine it happens. But yeah, it's not very clear. It is a black box.
Was that? Did you get put in a suspension for that, or was it?
No, we've actually the only thing I've had on our channel pertaining to episodes where we talk to climate scientists who don't agree with the idea that there's cataclysmic climate change is simply like the Wikipedia disclaimer. Climate change is real, as defined by the UN. Here's what it is, but nothing's been pulled because of climate change. But we have had the Wuhan flu content get pulled pretty aggressively over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I was pointing out to somebody, when I was a kid, I should probably quit telling the story for people to listen, but, as a child, you'd have like the R-rated movie that they'd put on regular TV, and they would either have to mute the bad word or they do some kind of lousy voiceover. It was like in the 80s. And you couldn't watch it. It was unwatchable. But YouTube now, and even the Danny Jones podcast with Jack Cruz, Mary Bowden, and Callie Means, I don't know if you saw that, but they had to mute COVID and vaccine. Everything it was silence throughout the whole conversation. So you can swear probably. You and I can say every swear word, probably every racial word out there, derogatory towards women. We can say all of that and it'd be fine. But you can't say, COVID and vaccine.
Yeah.
You can, I think, for this. I don't think it would get pulled just by saying the word, but
no, it's so weird, especially with all the data that's come to light in recent years, and I think it's pretty much well accepted widely. Even if you were a fan of Operation Warp Speed and the rollout, and you were first in line to get the jab, I think even those people are recognizing that it wasn't what it was marketed as, and we should be able to talk freely about it. But for some reason or another, YouTube does not like it. I mean, who knows exactly what happened, but YouTube CEO really instituted all these censorship policies. She got cancer and died relatively quickly after getting it, and leads one to believe like what caused that turbo cancer, if you will, which is something that's been accelerating since late 2021 or early 2021. Coincidentally enough, you'd think that the people running the company of a woman who died from turbo cancer, potentially caused by something that was released in 2021, would be introspective and want the truth to get out there.
Well, the other thing too is I thought maybe there was an Overton window with X, even though you and I both know X is not the ultimate free speech platform that some people perceive it to be.
No. Yeah, I mean, you've seen this positioning. Like, now you have Zuck trying to be all based. He was on Rogan, crying, "Woe is me! The government was forcing me to do all this stuff. I'm a change man." And you've had Bezos come out, not as hard, but similarly signaling like, "Hey, we're not going." The Washington Post did not make did not do an endorsement, a presidential endorsement, for the first time in decades. And you see all these big tech oligarchs purposely trying to position themselves from a narrative position, like, hey, we're cool now. We don't like censorship, but yet there still is a ton of censorship, and that's something that people need to realize. I do think I, X has been the most valuable tool for my career. I would not be where I am without Twitter. Now X, it still is extremely valuable, but it is by no means a free and open platform, which is what I try to focus on when I do with Bitcoin and leaning into open source communication protocols like Nostr is help people realize, like, at the end of the day, all these social media platforms, whether it's X, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, even they are centralized third parties, and centralized third parties are security holes, and so you should be moving to distribute your content and secure your money on not even platforms, on protocols that are distributed and cannot be censored or demonetized.
What are your thoughts on Substack?
Substack similarly, like they ideologically the team seems pretty driven to make sure that there's free and open discourse on their platform. At the end of the day, it's a centralized third party that can be pressured by governments or other outside forces, and at the end of the day, they have a finger over the button that can decide whether or not your content gets distributed. So yeah, I think it's admirable, their mission and what they've done so far, and I don't think they're censoring anybody, but at the end of the day, the potential to censor still exists there.
Well, and that's where you saw Elon, right, go all Orwellian at the end of the year when people started criticizing him over those H-1B visas. And
Hmm.
I said to a friend of mine, I go, pretty drastic change, and it shows you how fast things can shift.
Yeah, I mean, and that was crazy 'cause it was like started Christmas Eve, I believe, and then that whole H-1B fiasco unfolded over the course of the next 5 days, and I think many people were distracted with the holidays, obviously, but I was following it pretty closely. It was insane to see how aggressively Elon reacted to that.
And to the point where he just stripped people of their blue checks. And people don't realize, like, when you don't have the blue check, it limits the amount of words, characters. It limits the amount of video. You can only go up to 2 minutes and 19 seconds on your videos. And then you lose your ability to collect subscriptions.
Yeah, and it limits your reach. Like, you don't get fed into their algo. The and that's the other thing too. Whether it's Elon, Zuck, founders of Substack, founders of Rumble, they, I feel for them, and I know Jack Dorsey pretty well, and I've talked to him about his time at Twitter, and the pressure is immense to censor by governments and other outside forces, advertisers in the case of X specifically. And at the end of the day, you are running a business, and I think it's just growing pains. And the point I'm trying to make is humans are fallible, and I do think we should show some degree of grace to these people because the amount of pressure on them is immense. They have an insane amount of power on these platforms, and with great power comes great responsibility. And I'm sure the moral and ethical dilemmas that they face every day are something I would not want to deal with. And again, going back to what I was saying earlier, is that the way that communication on the internet should be approached is from a first principles perspective of doing it at the protocol level and not at the platform, siloed platform level. And I think that's the lesson we're learning 15, 20, or almost 20 years into the social media phenomena and experiment is we learned how to do it the centralized way, and it just doesn't scale socially without pissing a ton of people off. We need to get back to first principles and delegate the communication layer of the internet back to a protocol level, which is what protocols like Nostr are trying to do.
Well, I remember with Dave Collum and I've talked about, the real battle for free speech is the internet. And much to what you said, where everything is centralized and they don't want things to be decentralized because that means people like you and I have more freedom. And that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons where, and you correct me here, in your space in Bitcoin, they don't want that either. The powers that be do not want Bitcoin decentralized.
No, no. And that's like one thing. I don't know if this has been confirmed yet, but the Bitcoin industry and community at large is very excited about this incoming Trump administration. A lot of talk about a strategic Bitcoin reserve and favorable regulatory environment. And I think this was rumors yesterday, but there was some canaries on Twitter saying that Trump wants to make it so any Bitcoin bought or sold in America has to be mined in America. If it isn't, you get a tariff put on that, and that's just, if that's true, that is terrible for the Bitcoin network and literally impossible to implement. So I hope that he has good advice. I hope number one that that's not true and it's just a bad rumor. But if it isn't a bad rumor, and he does have this idea of made, quote unquote, made in America Bitcoin, it's just number one infeasible to implement due to the way the mining infrastructure and the pools work, and number two, um, not good for the decentralization of the network. And if you do have the intent of building a strategic Bitcoin reserve, I hope the Trump administration understands that trying to implement something like Made in America Bitcoin, all Bitcoin bought outside of Made in America Bitcoin is tariffed, does have could potentially have some centralizing forces on the mining industry, which would degrade the value prop of Bitcoin overall and hinder the ability of your strategic Bitcoin reserve to accrue in value.
Here's one of the things that concerns me, and why does the government feel the need to get involved in this? I mean, aren't we trying to get away, have a less government approach? Am I wrong here,
Yeah.
Marty? Or
No. Well, this is something that Bitcoiners have talked about for a while. I mean, the incentives of Bitcoin were set in stone when Satoshi launched the network, and you can go back on bitcointalk.org and forums from 2010, 2011, and you had these early Bitcoiners talking about the order of operations, how things would play out, and Bitcoin would start as this weird corner of the internet money that nerds and drug dealers and gamblers used. Then eventually, since there's only 21 million Bitcoin, individuals would begin to realize that Bitcoin has the potential to significantly increase in value. So they would begin to acquire it and hold it. And then eventually, companies would realize the same value, do the same. And it's been talked about for over 15 years ago. Like eventually, everybody's going to want to hold Bitcoin, including governments, because any sensible actor, whether that's an individual, a company, a city, a state, a nation state, just the way monetary competition works, you want to hold the best money, and Bitcoin is objectively the best money that the world has ever come into contact with. So naturally, it does make sense that governments would want to hold Bitcoin. They do want a good treasury asset on their balance sheet, and so I think it is the natural progression of Bitcoin's success is that anybody who is sensible enough to recognize that they need to hold harder money in a world that is getting in a monetary reality in which the fiat monetary system is being continually debased at an accelerating pace. So yeah, it makes sense, but I do think they're the broader Bitcoin community does have to be vigilant in making sure that the properties that give Bitcoin its value in the first place, the fact that it's decentralized, it's permissionless, it's censorship resistant, and it's scarce, number one, are preserved. And the government, if it tried to throw its weight around too much, could begin to impede on some of those pillars that make Bitcoin valuable in the first place. But Bitcoin's anti-fragile. I would not be surprised if the government's embrace of Bitcoin does lead them to believe that they can influence the network. I think they'll learn a hard lesson that it is extremely hard to do that, if not impossible. There could be some expensive lessons that are learned, but the government adopting Bitcoin doesn't surprise me. It's been talked about for 15 years, but I think the bigger question gets into will they try to control it? And I don't think they ultimately will ever be able to control it, but I do think they can footgun themselves and hinder innovation and the sovereignty and freedom and liberty of individuals if they try to.
So if they try to make you say buy, American made Bitcoin, let's say that Trump did an EO on that tomorrow. I mean, would he do an EO for something like that? Or would that be something he'd have to take to Congress?
I have no idea. See, this is the whole thing with the executive order is that I think it's a slippery slope. It's like what does need to go through Congress anymore? We're sort of expanding the design space of new diktats that can be brought to fruition just with an executive order. So I honestly I don't know.
Well, let's say that he did an EO on it hypothetically. I mean, how long would it take for the ability for to get that set up to where you were only able to buy American made because the resources aren't there today.
No, no, no. I think it's infeasible and impossible because the way Bitcoin works, it's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. I think 19.7 million have already been distributed to market. So between like 96% of the Bitcoin that will ever exist have already been distributed to the market, and or 95, somewhere around there. And those Bitcoin have already been quote unquote made, and many, if not most of them, have not been made in America. And so like you can't really go back and remake Bitcoin. Most of them have already been quote unquote made. If the definition of made is mined and distributed to the protocol, that cat's already out of the bag. And so you can't go back and remake Bitcoin in America. You can try to force Americans to buy Bitcoin that will be mined from here into the future and have it be produced by mining pools that are domiciled in the United States and only allow United States-based miners to point their hash rate at them. But again, I think the economics of the system and the incentives of the system are such that any business that tried to limit their scope to that subsector of the Bitcoin economy would become uncompetitive pretty rapidly, and it would not be a good business. And so those businesses would fail, and you would not be able to essentially manifest that diktat made in America Bitcoin.
Yeah, now with all these meme coins, this stuff is. Let's talk about the Hawk Tui girl first. Uh,
Ooh,
she's probably done, right? Her career's over.
I mean, if you want to call it a career, or 15 minutes of fame, I think that
The
is
William Hung American Idol, one of those things.
yeah. I feel bad for her. She's 21, and I think she got some terrible people surrounding her that convinced her, like, hey, that's the thing. Meme coins are the manifestation of just pure degeneracy, and it seems like they're now for the longest time, particularly in America, there was this regulatory gray area where the SEC was not providing clarity on what people could and could not launch, and you'd only find out in retrospect that what you launched was bad. The SEC would hit you with a Wells notice and go through the legal process, pay a fine, or go to jail. But it only happened to a few projects, and so you've had thousands, tens of thousands of these tokens launch over the years, and until yesterday, or 2 days ago, or over the weekend, whenever that was, Friday, it was unclear whether or not it was just going to be an open ball game to do whatever you want. And I think with the launch of Trump coin, that was a signal from the Trump administration, like you guys can go do whatever you want. And back to Hawk Tuah, she had some scammers around her who were looking to make a quick buck. And the way these meme coins work, they're going back to centralization. I respect meme coins in the sense that they're extremely transparent, where it's just like if you're a degenerate gambler, you can launch this coin and you can try to trade in depending on what the meme coin represents. In the case of Hawk Tuah Girl, it was her brand that it represented, and the value prop or the thesis that people pushing meme coins will put out there is that meme coins give individuals and communities and memes the ability to monetize their attention, and I think that's and to be clear, I think it's a complete scam, completely retarded, and don't think there's any long-term value in it. It's a big game of hot potato, and Hawk 2 is a perfect example of it. Like, she had her 15 minutes of fame, and you're not going to buy Hawk 2 a coin, hold it for 30 years. Like, she's not going to be going out there putting out viral man on the street interviews every day and accruing a fan base that wants to buy Hawk 2 a coin. But she messed up massively in surrounding herself with bad people who overtly just launched the coin, got a bunch of her quote unquote fans to buy the coin, then immediately dumped on retail and took millions of dollars. So I don't think she'll get in trouble. It seems like with the launch of Trump coin specifically, it seems like this is fair game now. Complete uh, degenerate acceleration is upon us, and it has a very. Actually, I was thinking about this in the shower this morning. If you've ever read "When Money Dies," I believe by Niall Ferguson, about the Weimar Republic and what was going on during their hyperinflation in the early 1900s. It's very similar to that. It's just a different mechanism this time around. Crypto meme coin seems to be the speculative assets that people are using to try to attain wealth in a environment of persistent and high inflation.
In her case, and we'll shift over to Trump here in a second. But in her case, did you think her people came to her and said, "Hey, we'll pay you X amount if we can put this on a meme coin"?
Yeah, and I think she's just a naive 21-year-old who really didn't understand the world she was playing in or the magnitude of the scam that could be unleashed in her name. They basically marketed like, you have a brand. This is how they market it. They say, talk to a girl, Haley Welch, you have a brand. You're hot right now. You need to take advantage of this. Instead of spinning up an OnlyFans or trying to go to events and charging a fee, here's an easy way to monetize your brand, and the value that you think that brand can attain is to launch a token associated with you, and let the free market basically pump value into that, and determine the value of your brand via this meme coin market cap. And the mechanics of how these meme coins work typically, and it's the same with Trump, is the um, the blockchains like Ethereum and Solana. They make it very easy to spin up tokens on top of their protocols. And the first manifestation of this phenomenon was back in 2017 with the ICO craze, which is initial coin offering. And back then there was at least some hand waving about fundamental value of the company or project underlying an initial coin offering. Back then, it was it was a competitor to VC equity raising, instead of building a company and going out and trying to convince VCs about your business plan and your team and the trajectory of your company. You could simply write a white paper, put the business plan in there, and then launch this ICO and have the public basically invest in that ICO and invest in your company via the ICO. And then you'd raise funds that way and then build the project. And the idea of the ICO was that the profits or the revenues of the underlying company that launched the ICO would roll up into the token. And to use that product, people would have to use the ICO token. And over time, if the company is successful, the token would gain in value. And so those people who initially invested in the ICO would reap the benefits of that token creation. And it's all bullshit. It's all fugazi,
Fairy dust, right? Wolf of Wall
wizardry.
Street.
Yeah, yeah. It's all bullshit. Because that's what most people don't realize, particularly in the world of broader crypto, is they take what's happening. They see Bitcoin success and they say, oh, this blockchain technology that Bitcoin runs on, that technology is the innovation. And so we just need to apply that innovation, maybe make it more efficient, faster, easier to code on, and give that to everybody and spin up our own tokens that can compete with Bitcoin, or maybe not. Maybe they'll market it as not competing with Bitcoin, but what they don't realize, they all compete with Bitcoin. And long story short, the market is completely misconstruing what's happening with Bitcoin as a tech revolution when it's really a monetary revolution. Bitcoin is enabled by a tech innovation, like Satoshi's invention is objectively and undeniably an innovation in cryptographic digital currency, distributed digital currency, open source digital currency, and but it's a monetary revolution more importantly. And all these tokens, whether they're ICOs, meme coins, or whatever it may be, they're competing on monetary properties. And the crypto world doesn't recognize that. They think it's a tech innovation, but it's a monetary innovation. And when you have a free and open market competition for monetary goods, the best money is going to win out. And objectively, as I've said before, Bitcoin is the best money. Nothing that is produced, whether it's by Huck to a Girl, an ICO team, Trump's World Fi, whatever they're calling it, is going to be able to outcompete Bitcoin. It's because all these things that I just described are centralized. They're issued by central parties that can manipulate supply, and like with Hawk Tuah and Trump, I started by explaining the token economics. The way most of these projects launch is they'll basically print all the tokens before they launch, and they'll allocate a large percentage to insiders that keep it off the market for a period of time, and then let's say 20 to 40% of the supply float on the market and let people trade that, while the insiders keep 60 to 80% off the market to create this perceived liquidity crunch in the supply of the particular token that's being launched. And it's just, it's really hyper centralized, and compared to Bitcoin, is nowhere near the monetary good that Bitcoin is.
How is that even legal?
That's, I mean, I mean it's not I mean, if you go back, and this Ethereum really started this. Ethereum really popularized this, and it started. There was ICOs, and back in the day, like in the early days when I first got into Bitcoin, if you go on like BitcoinTalk.org and the forums back there, like this whole process has evolved, and it's gone through many iterations over the course of the last, I would say, 12 years. Specifically, back in the day, the equivalent to the ICO was called the fair launch proof of work with no pre-mine. So you'd have a developer team say, hey, we wrote this white paper, we wrote this software, and we created this blockchain system that is better than Bitcoin. It's faster. You can put more data in it. It has more privacy, or whatever the adjective you want to throw in there, the marketing pizzazz you want to put in there. And they would say, all right, we have this coin. We're going to launch it on this date, and here's the proof of work algorithm. We're going to do a fair launch. So when we hit launch, anybody with computer software that can mine this particular scripting algorithm can participate in the accumulation and distribution of this token. And that quickly pumped and dumped, and then people needed to go find a new way to scam people, and that's where ICOs came from, where it was like, all right, we're going to completely throw the idea of a fair launch proof of work, a fair proof of work coin launch out the window, and just we're going to create this whole new scheme. Ethereum popularized it. Ethereum itself was an initial coin offering. And it's funny because people are complaining about Trump coin and Hawk Tuah coin. Ethereum was the same exact mechanism, where the Ethereum Foundation raised a bunch of Bitcoin over a period of time, and then said, okay, if you get in on the ICO, we're going to create this Ethereum network. We're going to raise money to support the development ecosystem, to create this foundation and invest in this space. And so they raised, I forget how much Bitcoin, but at the time, I believe hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, or maybe not even that much. But so they raised the Bitcoin, and then they launched the network, and anybody who provided Bitcoin for the initial funding of the ICO got insider allocations. So 80% of the Ethereum supply was distributed to those insiders who participated in the ICO at the beginning. And then from there, you had Ethereum distributed in the market, 20% rest of the supply distributed to the market, quote unquote, fairly. But the mechanism of how Ethereum was launched is very similar to Trump and Hawk Tuah coin. We've just gotten to the point where everybody understands it's bullshit, and um, it, uh, it's just everybody's like, all right, it's fair game. We're at the degenerate acceleration point. Like, we're not gonna hand wave about everything. This is just pure casino gambling, and we have the ability and the mechanisms to launch these speculative tokens, and um, we're just gonna freeball it, and just no preconceived notions of legitimacy or a company or
It's like real.
some
It's
sort of
like real
competitor
life.
to Bitcoin behind it.
It's like real life Wolf of Wall Street, Martin. Not to cut you off. It's like real life Wolf of Wall Street with penny
Yeah,
stocks.
and how is it legal? Like, I mean, that was. I hope listeners, particularly if you haven't heard me on this show before, I want to make it clear. I'm a Bitcoiner. I focus on Bitcoin. There's a clear demarcation between Bitcoin and everything else in the crypto world. And for the longest time, the Bitcoin, like myself included, like we've been arguing, like Ethereum, objectively, if you look at the Howey test, it was a an illegal securities offering. You had Vitalik Buterin out there talking about the pre-mine. He's going to raise money, and he was openly saying the you're going to buy into this ICO. We're going to give you Ether tokens, and those Ether tokens are going to increase in value. And so you have, I mean, if you understand the Howey test, or at least as it was understood 10, 11 years ago, like that is a clear legal securities offering, not going through the processes. And I think that there was just an immense amount, like they raised so much money and the value of Ether went up so quickly that I think Ethereum and then other coins in the space, whether it's Solana, Tron, whatever it may be, they accumulated so much wealth so quickly that I think they were able to pay an army of lobbyists to hold the SEC back to the best of their abilities, to the point where we're at the point where it's just like, all right, we're just not going to regulate this. It's all quote unquote legal now. Is it moral? Is it ethical? I don't think so. But and then you have this internal battle in the industry too, where there was just obviously this anarcho libertarian bent, where many people, myself included, don't think that the SEC should exist in the first place. People want to take risk and lose a bunch of money on things that they don't understand. That's a good way to learn a lesson, and they should be able to do that. And so, but then you have like the actual legal code as it stands, and it's frustrating as well because it's like, all right, do we have laws that regulate this stuff, and are we going to enforce those laws? And um, the SEC was very selective with how they enforced it and didn't really give clarity on what they were and were not going to do. And I think it's led us to this point where there's so much wealth and money sloshing around in the space that it's almost, I don't want to say it's a systemic risk, but it's just like the cat's out of the bag. Like these people are gambling. And at the same time, over the course of this history I've been describing, you've had legalized sports betting proliferate. And um, so, yeah, I think the regulators, the government's just calling uncle and saying, all right, just go crazy, do what you want to do. I think Trump coin was an explicit sort of head nod towards, all right, we're in the degenerate acceleration phase. Let's do it, folks. And again, I do want to tie this back to when money dies. Like these are not good signs um, from a societal perspective. This is what you see at the end of empires. And even with that, like, even saying that though, like I do, Bitcoin provides a great white pill, and that's how I'm still trying to like work through it in my mind, but like that, the Trump admin coming in, I think you have to take the good with the bad. And what I'm doing personally is just trying to force, not force, but illuminate people that there is a difference here, and you're probably going to get burned in crypto, Bitcoin is a way out of a lot of the systemic issues we face as individuals and companies and cities and states from an economic perspective. And while all this degenerate acceleration is going on, I highly encourage people to block out that noise and focus on Bitcoin, because I do think Bitcoin is a mechanism to really save the U.S. economy and the individual at the end of the day. And if the um, if being able to do that comes at the cost of the meme coin and the degeneracy in that world just being unleashed as well, like, I'll take it. I think compared to what the prospects of a Kamala Harris administration would have provided for the Bitcoin industry and crypto at large, like, I'd happily take the degenerate acceleration over the overbearing nanny state that would have likely come upon the industry if Kamala had won. I'm sorry, that was very wordy.
No, no, no. What were your thoughts when you saw that Trump coin and then Melania coin right after?
uh, the Trumps don't know how this industry works. They shot their load too early. Um, Again, the perceived, like, the meme coins, you have this like perceived scarcity of attention and brand. And when they launched Trump coin, I think that's why it fucking went to what, like $60 billion in value in 3 days or something like that, something insane. And granted, a large reason for that is because they kept 80% of the supply off the market until insiders started dumping. But you can tell, I think Eric and Don Jr. are running this for the Trump family, and I don't think Donald. I think it's the Trump brand, not Donald Trump personally, but obviously he has ownership of the brand. But they don't understand the space. Like, if they wanted to do it right and make the most money possible, they just would have launched Trump coin. Because I think the market was like, oh my God, we've got a Trump coin, and that is such a good brand, and we got to get Trump coin. It's going to go up. He's the president. He's going to be pumping it, blah, 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 blah. And then 2 days later, they diluted the scarcity of the brand by launching Melania coin. And so I think what the market saw is like, oh, they're going to have a Trump, a Melania Baron, like, and the whole consolidated brand in this one Trump meme coin was diluted almost immediately. And that's why I would argue that's why I think the market fell as rapidly and as far as it did once Melania launched.
Are regular people, going to lose millions of dollars from this then?
Uh, Regular people don't have millions of dollars, but they will lose. They will
Good
lose.
point.
They will lose. Yeah, they'll lose the little money they do have. A lot will, and that's the thing. If your audience has caught on to this, is like, oh, this is the new get rich quick scheme. It never works that way. Many people will make many millions of dollars, but that will be a small percentage of the overall market participants that ape into these markets. Timing these markets is impossible, as we saw over the weekend. You could literally lose 50% of the value in minutes because somebody launches a Melania coin. And unless you're an insider or somebody who's glued to their screen trading the 1 minute candles, you're not going to catch this, and you're likely going to lose your money.
Yeah, what amazes me about this is the optics. Like, why would the family allow this right going into the inauguration? I mean, am I wrong? I mean,
No, I mean,
you're cashing in on a name.
yeah, I mean, it's not a decision I would make, but let's just look at the history of the Trumps. This is par for the course for them. I think it is somewhat, you do like, you respect it to, it's just like unabashed, like, we're gonna fucking monetize the shit out of our brand, and we've been doing that our whole careers, and here's a new mechanism to do it, and they went for it. And they did cash out some money, I believe. I think they cashed out like $500 million in the first 2 days. So it was the rumor spreading around the industry. So they made a quick buck. Is it legal? I mean, uh, probably not by the letter of the law, but it doesn't seem like we live in a land that cares about the law that much anymore. uh, yeah, it's weird. It's like hard to come. We're in this very weird time in history, particularly in American politics and the rule of law.
Yeah, and Dave Portnoy, didn't he write something? He made $1 million overnight or several $1 million overnight or something.
Yeah, yeah, he got a 200% gain, cashed out, and put it all on the Bills to win the Super Bowl. One of Dave's best trades of his career, I think. Have you watched it?
We literally live in clown world, Marty. Like we
We
literally.
do, we do, and this was predicted. It's predicted. I mean, like I said, this is, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. We've seen this Roman Republic, the Weimar Republic, um, other hyperinflationary events, empire degradations, the sovereign individual. Um, they wrote about this in the mid 90s. We're going to get to a point in the information age where uh, the amount of information that the public is being inundated with is going to be such that it's going to be impossible, almost impossible, unless you prepare yourself to discern from the signal from the noise. And we're just living through it. And again, that's why I think Bitcoin is the signal in it. And uh, if you focus on Bitcoin, accumulating Bitcoin, and block out the noise and the siren calls of meme coins and broader crypto, you're going to look up 10, 15 years from now and be very happy that you did that. But between now and then, there's going to be a fuck ton of noise. There's going to be a lot of legally dubious things that happen, and a lot of people that get burned along the way.
What is your biggest concern coming into this new administration?
Um, Biggest concern is that despite, and again, it's like I say all this, but I'm happy that Donald Trump's in office and it's not Kamala Harris. I do think, and a lot of the executive orders that were signed, like I do think they're going to put America on a good trajectory to recover economically. But my biggest concern is that despite everything the Trump administration wants to do from a policy perspective, the sovereign debt crisis is just going to be an overwhelming a problem that's so overwhelming that nothing you do on the policy side is going to be able to prevent you from facing the gorilla in the room, which is the fact that we have a global debt crisis that you can't get away from.
And that's where, the fragility of the system, and we learned that during COVID, right? How fragile any little bit of adversity or any type of punch, and we just can't take it.
Yeah, we learned it in 2023 too. Like, if these bond yields go up, the value of the underlying bonds goes down. Like, the banking system is using them as their liquid reserves, and you run into a liquidity crisis. And then you look around, look at commercial real estate, backed securities, and the delinquency rates of the commercial real estate mortgages in those securities. Like, they're going up to levels that haven't been seen since the 2008 crisis. The inflation, excuse me, inflation has not been solved. Janet Yellen on her way out the door is like, "Yeah, we don't have any money. We're gonna hit the debt ceiling in a couple months." Like, this is the signal. Like, and I think the manifestation of the lawlessness and broader crypto and the meme coin phenomena is sort of like a, hey, I don't know if it's bread and circuses, or hey, this is a pressure release valve for the common man to potentially feel like they're wealthier. And so, like, let's just give it to them. But yeah, I don't think the economy is in a good spot, and I am very optimistic about the policies that the Trump administration wants to put forth. But again, I think the fact that there's way too much debt, not enough dollars in the system, is a problem that no policy or signature can solve immediately, at least. And so I think that's my biggest concern, is that we're just going to get buzzsawed by this debt situation that has been growing and accelerating um, my whole life, but most particularly in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I can't even believe, driving around here in Phoenix and Scottsdale, and they continue to build these high-end apartments, talk to small business owners. I don't know how half these places are still open, especially if, like, from a restaurant standpoint. I don't know how they're surviving.
Yeah, most of them are by the skin of their teeth. Yeah, you see here in Austin too. We had the boom post COVID. There's got to be like 12 cranes in the air right now in Center City, Austin. Like, I don't know. Like, I think some of them have stopped work. Like, I don't know what the situation is. I mean, Facebook, pre-COVID, I think they invested in building one of the buildings right down the street from me, and then 2 years later backed out of the lease. So that's like two-thirds of the building. That was just the person who was supposed to lease it just completely backed out of the deal. So you have like I believe like a 70-story skyrise here. Um, that is, I don't know what it's been like filling that in at that Facebook hole that was left, but I imagine it hasn't been easy, or it hasn't been happening.
It's just sitting there right now.
I think it hasn't been finished yet. I think they have to finish it and then try to fill it up.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. It's like, you get the WEF going on in Davos right now. It's kind of a crazy thought in my head, but I found the whole thing bizarre how big tech came behind Trump this go around when they did everything they could to get rid of him in 2020. And it's like, is WEF shifting over? This is, I mean, I see Bezos and Tim Cook and Elon. Who am I missing from that? They were all at the inauguration yesterday.
Zuck was
Oh,
there.
Zuckerberg, that's right. Yeah. I mean, the wealth of
Yeah.
those individuals is over $1 trillion, and they're the ones that are going to build these instruments for the digital ID.
Yeah, it's not great. And I mean, it makes sense. They're just following the incentives. They'll pander to whoever they need to. I think, particularly with Zuck and Bezos, it's become clear that once it became pretty evident that Trump was going to win, they shifted tune pretty quickly and tried to get in his good graces. Tim Cook as well. They all invested in his inaugural fund or whatever, or donated to his inaugural fund. They blow with the wind. They're trying to make who's ever in power happy so that they can get them off their backs and potentially get favors.
Yeah, but that's why I find this whole thing is just like it's too good to be true in a way, because the fact that, I mean, Kristi Noem at her confirmation hearing was talking about how the border wall won't be an actual, all of it won't be an actual wall. There'll be a digital identification,
Yeah.
and I'm like, do people not see this? Like, because once they
Yeah.
implement these measures, they never go back.
No, it's a big bait and switch. And that's it's been so it's hard to grapple with because you do like the situation in the country and the economy is so bad under Biden, and they were censorious and debanking people and doing all these terrible things. And as an individual, as a citizen of this country, you want it to go in a better direction. And Trump, and I think the core of what the MAGA movement preaches external with Trump is right. Like, we should make America great again. We should make sure that American citizens are able to live a life of dignity, have a good job, grow a family, not suffer from inflation, put food on the table, and live a comfortable life in their communities. And a lot of what Trump campaigned on is sensible in my mind. But then, yeah, you have the new tech, little tech, um, some people like to say it, get behind him, whether it's Peter Thiel, Sachs, whoever it may be, Joe Lonsdale, and really put their efforts behind them. We're going to have dynamism. We need to prepare for the digital age, and we need to really um, streamline the government and bring in these public-private partnerships to make sure that we're getting the most bang from our buck from a tax perspective. And it makes sense. And on paper, I mean, I was at an event last year or 2 years ago now at this point, where there was a lot of defense tech venture capitalists. They were talking about Anduril and similar companies. And when you look at it objectively from the perspective of how much it costs for them to create the technologies that they produce versus Raytheon, Boeing, and others, the big defense contractors, like they can produce tools that are just as effective or orders of magnitude more effective for a tenth of the cost. And from a taxpayer perspective, that makes sense to me. It's like, why are we spending $800 billion in defense when you could spend 80 billion and get the same, if not better, results? But then you have the and I think Sam Hyde actually articulated this well in his message to Elon in the post H-1B visa debate, which it seems like the tech elite in the country and Lonsdale is a big advocate of this. Others, Cal's not like a tech guy, but he's like an anti-China guy. Like they're all trying to compete with China's surveillance state, and they're openly marketing like we have better AI and surveillance tools. Palantir is the crown jewel of this space, and it's just very odd. And I do, and that's what I think Whitney has been warning people about for years: is private-public partnership. You worry about the Indiana Jones like bait and switch. Like you're just switching out the old guard incumbent military industrial complex for this new um, surveillance military complex that just has a new facade. It's this tech elite, and yeah, it's not a world that I want to live in. The whole digital ID thing, I think the border, that is something that people have to be very vigilant about. That's going to be the bait and switch there is you want to secure the border, we need to usher in this digital ID system. And that is a battle that really needs the people need to understand that they're going to need to fight. And I think the framing of the conversation and the narrative around digital ID, people really need to begin setting the frame from the perspective of individual liberty, because Palantir and that whole complex is really ahead of the game in terms of setting the frame and coaxing people into wandering into a digital panopticon.
And then they tie in the whole voter ID with it as well to make sure you have free and fair elections.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting times.
You've been abroad lately. Have you ever thought to yourself, maybe it's time to leave the United States with everything that's going on and the direction it's heading? Because and before you answer that, you look back from 20 plus years ago, 9/11, and you just see as long as technology is advancing, everybody wanted Homeland Security, everybody, TSA at the airports, like that stuff, it never goes away. And as long as technology is continuing to advance the way it is, they're just going to tighten the grip, tighten the grip, tighten the grip, no matter who's in charge. Does it make you think, all right, maybe based on your experience, maybe it's a time to go somewhere else?
No, no, I'm never leaving. I'm not fucking leaving. Um, yeah, no, I do. Like with all this said,
Like
I do
Argentina, man. In your industry, Argentina isn't Argentina, or is it El Salvador? El Salvador is
El
a big one.
Salvador, yeah, but I'm American. I'm like sixth generation American. I've got a big Irish Catholic family, and I'm not leaving. And going back to the MAGA movement, I do think there is genuine American spirit in the MAGA movement that truly cares deeply about individual liberty, sovereignty, and right to privacy. And I think we have the tools to enable all those things. And that's a big thing I've been doing, or a big focus and intent of what I do at TFTC and have the conversations that I do and have the people that I have on the show is to help set the frame for these conversations. I think we have an incredible example of, um, and I think Bitcoiners contributed massively to the degradation of ESG specifically. And we did a lot of work, particularly in the mining industry, starting back in like 2018, 2019, of really attacking ESG as a concept. And I think it's objectively clear today that that was a successful propaganda attack on the idea of ESG. And I think we can similarly do that with digital surveillance in the panopticon. It just takes intent, and you have to own the frame. You have to set the narrative. And I do, going back to the MAGA movement, I do think that the American spirit is alive and well in many individuals throughout the country. I just think that spirit needs to be unlocked and encouraged, and given confidence to go out and set the frame and say, "Hey, we're very happy that Trump is involved. Tech guys, you're doing some cool stuff, but here's a line in the sand we're not going to cross. Like individual sovereignty and most importantly, the right to privacy in your affairs is a line we're not going to cross. And we just need to begin setting that frame. And we've seen this happen um, with chat apps. For the longest time, the governments, Western governments, it's still happening in Europe, unfortunately, for everybody over there. Europe's a lost cause, but I don't think America is. But here in America, the United States government actively tried to prevent end-to-end encrypted communications from proliferating. They going back to Bill Clinton, they wanted that chip on the computer. That was a backdoor to everything people were doing. And as we turn into the 21st century and even in the last decade, there's a strong fight to get backdoors and end-to-end encrypted apps like WhatsApp and Signal and others. And it was a battle that was inevitably lost. And you had the government um, essentially capitulate a couple months ago when it became apparent that the Chinese government or some actor, who knows whether it was the Chinese or somebody else, got into all the telecom systems and was just sucking people's unencrypted data and communications from telecom companies. And then the government had to come out and recognize that it is in the best interest of individual Americans to use end-to-end encrypted apps. And they essentially send out a PSA, like make sure you're using end-to-end encrypted apps. And I think so they had to capitulate to that. I think the same will happen. That's a big thing that's happening right now in Bitcoin is there's a lot of privacy innovations that are being brought to market, and there's a lot of debate about whether or not governments will enable these technologies to proliferate. And I think we're beginning to really put our minds together to figure out how to set the frame and own the narrative around financial privacy. And I think we're going to be successful in that. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be long fought, but I think inevitably we will have financial privacy enabled by Bitcoin and other technologies that are plugging into the Bitcoin network. So yeah, it's going to be a long slog. I'm not going anywhere. I do think the American spirit is alive and well, and I do think we can have a future in which individual sovereignty, liberty, freedom, and privacy is respected and most importantly protected by the technologies that we have at our fingertips. It's just making sure that the open source end-to-end encrypted technologies beat out the Palantirs of the world, the open AIs and all that.
Who's next on your show?
Who's next on my show? I'm sitting down with Tur Demeester. That's actually funny. I'm sitting down with Tur Demeester tomorrow. He was just in Orania, I believe in South Africa, which is this sort of enclave, quasi-independent state that he just visited, and we're going to talk about his visit. And this is essentially a community that has a bunch of private like services, private security, uh, private food systems, and like I don't believe the government's involved. I think the political stability in South Africa has devolved, and Orania has been around for a while, but I think they're proving a way in which to build this future I was just describing. So it's funny you mentioned his next tour. So we'll be talking about a lot of these topics and what he saw in Orania when he was there a few weeks ago.
Oh, I can't wait to hear that. When will you put? When? How soon will you publish it?
Hopefully Thursday. Um, I think Thursday morning.
And anybody else on the docket? I mean, you can't have 2025 without a Dave Collum conversation, right? Or
Yep. Talking to Dave next Tuesday. Um, so that'll be out next week. I've got then James Check, who is an incredible Bitcoin analyst. He does a lot of that's the beauty of Bitcoin, the open source network. You can derive a lot of market insights based off of what's happening on the Bitcoin blockchain, right? How Bitcoins are moving and how much is moving at any given point in time. And so he does an incredible newsletter, podcast, or private YouTube channel, Check on Chain. So we've been doing like a 3 month check in on what he's seeing on the back end. So I'll record with him, and then I've got Larry Lepard. He just wrote a book called the big print. I believe that gets released in a couple of weeks here. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. And then Punter Jeff, who is one of the preeminent MicroStrategy analysts. We're going to talk about how MicroStrategy is leveraging the convertible bond market to push fiat money into Bitcoin.
You know who originally told me about you? How I was introduced was Tracy Shukart.
Yeah, I love Chai Girl. I've been following. I think we've talked about this before, but I've been following her on Twitter since like 2012 when I worked at Amanda's Futures Fund. I started following her on FinTwit. It was 2013, but her oil analysis, and still to this day, was something I hawked as an analyst at this fund.
Have you ever had her on your show?
Yeah, yes. Trace has been on a couple times. We need to catch up.
Yeah, as I bring her name up, I'm thinking, I'm like, God, I need to reach out to her too. Small world that we're all in, right? How you hear about somebody through somebody else, and then to come to find out, you know Dave, you know Tom Luongo, you're familiar with Kunstler, and on and on and on.
Yeah, and this is why I'm confident we're gonna win. I'm not leaving. Individuals like yourself, Tom, Dave, Tracy, Ian Carroll, Whitney. Like, there are people that care about the future of this country and disseminating good information with signal to help people discern what's going on and make better decisions. And I think what we're doing is only getting more popular. And it's funny, you're beginning to see the CIA Operation Mockingbird, I think, has shifted from the mainstream media to the podcasting space. So that's another thing to be wary about. There's a lot of, I think, this whole UFO thing, like the Sean Ryan stuff that happened a few weeks ago about around the UAP. Like, I think that's a massive psyop. I think he may be some controlled op.
What about the Sarah Adams? Did you watch any of that?
That was the one, right, where she was
Talking about Al Qaeda and all the.
Yeah, and the domestic terrorists, and yeah, they've been choreographing these narratives for the better part of 18 months now. And fear and control. I mean, going back to digital ID, like what happened in New Orleans, what happened in Vegas, like that was all like it was all too perfect for me. Both of those events are sketchy in my mind, but they are means to scare people and then be like, oh, we need to secure the border. Here's the digital ID. And then you coax people into it. It's important, again, from a framing and narrative perspective, to let people know that this is how they act. The Hegelian dialectic, you cause a problem, then you present the solution. And the solution is the ultimate goal of the problem in the first place. And the fact that the New Orleans guy was like ISIS, and we know that the CIA was heavily involved in ISIS, it's like, come on, guys, you're getting lazy. And then they had the reporter walking through the guy's house the next day. Quran was open to a particular page, and she was reading the verse. It's like, this is sloppy, guys.
And then the whole Vegas thing was like it felt like it would divide that was between the special ops and the intelligence community. Like they were trying to split that down the middle, right? Because the email, was it a valid email? Was it? But then I've seen military people talk about Sam Shoemade, and they say very credible.
Yeah, it's all weird. Yeah, that's why, again, there's gonna be a lot of noise. I try to stay focused on Bitcoin and other open source technologies that give power back to the individual. And I think staying focused and focusing on the things that are actually going to bring about valuable change that preserve individual sovereignty, liberty, privacy is what I'm spending my time on. And I think if you care about the future, you should focus on as well. So like the platform side, I mentioned Nostr earlier. So Nostr is this open source communications protocol. Ian Carroll just joined it earlier this week, and you compare it to things like X, TikTok, Facebook, whatever it may be. You own your data, so it runs on similar private public key cryptography that Bitcoin runs on. And so you have this Nostr protocol. You have your private public key pair. When you send a note to the network, when you send data to the network, you use your private key to send that data, so the network knows that you control that private key, so that data definitely came from you. Then the protocol has all that data, and then you can build apps, which are known as clients on top of it, that present that data in different ways. And that's open source, easily accessible. You can build these clients and these apps very easily. And then you can take your private key from one app to the other, and all your data will show up. And so if you compare this to something like X controls all your data. You don't have a private public key pair. You have a permissioned username and password that X ultimately controls at the end of the day. And they control your data and they sell your data. Similarly with TikTok, all that. Imagine a protocol that enables to access X-like features, TikTok-like features, Substack-like features, and you control the data as long as you control your private key at the end of the day. So you can take a private key into any of these apps. Imagine being able to take it into X, into TikTok, into Substack, plug in your private key, and all of your data that you've ever sent on the protocol is there in that one app. I don't know if that was clear, but I think the message I'm trying to get out there is this is the preferable way to do social media in the digital age if you actually care about controlling your data and not allocating control of your data to a centralized third party. Again, I think we should show the people controlling the centralized third parties some grace, because the stresses and the problems they deal with are immense, but the whole idea should be to take out, they shouldn't be in that position in the first place. You just simply remove them from that position by pushing all the communication down to a protocol level that nobody controls.
So you said Nostr. So you're using that now too?
Yes. If you want to check it out, you can download Primal. They have a desktop app. You can go to primal.net. If you go to Google Play or Apple App Store, search Primal, Primal. That's the best way to get on.
Where can people find you, Marty?
Find me on Primal, Marty at primal.net. X, Marty Bent, at Marty Bent. And then TFTC, a Bitcoin podcast. Search on your favorite podcasting app.
On YouTube?
YouTube as well, tftc.tv on YouTube.
Spotify? You're on everything.
Yeah.
You Rumble? Do you Rumble at all?
I do Rumble. I haven't figured out Rumble, though. We're not as popular on Rumble as we are on other platforms.
Yeah, Rumble. I started with that because I wasn't, coming back full circle here. I didn't even want to waste my time with YouTube because I figured they just cut me off right away, step on the back of my neck. And like within 2 days of creating the channel, because people are like, well, your audience would be bigger if you do YouTube. I'm like, okay, might as well run with this as long as I can. 2 days in, one episode got pulled. And then a month later, I get put in a 7-day suspension, which won't come off until mid-March. So, but I don't know. It's like you don't know rhyme or reason what gets pulled and what doesn't get pulled.
Yeah. That's the other thing, Nostr. There's YouTube Rumble competitors popping up. There's a Twitch competitor already. So we do a live show every Thursday. Me and a co-host, Rabbit Hole Recap. And there's a platform on Nostr called zap.stream where we can send our RMTP token. I forget what the acronym is. We can do it straight from what do we use? Not Riverside. Whatever the streaming software that we use.
StreamYard?
Just put in our token there.
StreamYard?
Not StreamYard, it's another one. It'll come to me as soon as we stop recording. But long story short, we put it there. And the other good thing about Nostr I didn't mention is that Bitcoin is integrated as this native payment layer. So you set up a Nostr account, you can put a Bitcoin address in your account, and people know that's where they send you Bitcoin. So when me and my co-host go on zap.stream, our show Rabbit Hole Recap, we have an account for that. That has an associated Bitcoin address with it. And think of like YouTube Super Chat or Twitch tips, whatever it may be, but it's just like Bitcoin that you receive immediately and it's not held by YouTube or anybody else. Zap.stream, like our live stream, as people are listening, they can send us Bitcoin and we can pull their comment up and do like the super chat there. So that exists already on Nostr as well. And again, open source, distributed protocol, nobody can censor, and you truly own your data. And now we're beginning to see this circular Bitcoin economy emerge on it because Bitcoin has been integrated seamlessly. So I think that's where the signal is going to be over the next decade. I think Nostr is going to begin to eat the market share of these centralized platforms. It's going to be a slog. It's going to be a while, but I would be confident in saying that 10 years from now, Nostr will be mainstream, and that'll be the way people interact with social media apps.
And you're saying to start that process, go to primal.net.
Yes.
Marty, as always, thanks for doing this. I look forward to listening to more of your shows. And I mean, you're outstanding as a host, so and as outstanding as a guest. So I appreciate you doing this, and look forward to continuing to follow your work and more conversations ahead for 2025.
Yeah, Michael, thank you so much. I always love coming on, and yeah, I can't wait to do it again.
Mic drop.